Hi everybody, Adrian Fontes here. Did you know that the Democrats of Greater Tucson has a website, thedgt.org, and if you subscribe, it's only 20 bucks. You can support this great weekly communication where folks get together. Sometimes there's candidates, sometimes folks like me pop on to help understand what's going on in the world. The Democrats of Greater Tucson, thedgt.org. Join up today.
We're really pleased to have Miranda Schubert with us today. She's running in Ward 6 to be on the City Council. She works full-time as the operations manager, on-air DJ, producer, and youth broadcasting camp counselor at KXCI. Awesome, love it. She serves on 2 City of Tucson commissions, the Complete Streets Coordinating Council and Board of Adjustment, and Everyone, a local housing and transit advocacy group, and the first YMBY action chapter in the state of Arizona. Miranda also leads the Housing Justice Education Project, a community food bank of Southern Arizona Thriving Communities grant-funded initiative that focuses on co-organizing with community members about solutions to the affordable housing crisis. She also helped form the Transit for All Coalition, TFAC, with other community groups and organizations across Tucson to advocate for more investment in public transit. She is in her 9th season, and I did not know this, Miranda, with the Tucson Roller Derby Club. So that's cool too. Volunteers as a cook at Casa Maria, wonderful community serving organization for folks who need help and food, and also the Tucson Alliance for Housing Justice. She's a dues-paying member of Communication Workers of America, 7065, with Tucson's unique local character. When she first moved here 13 years ago, she and her wife, Maz, now own a home in Feldman's neighborhood with historic status and are proud neighborhood association members. They have a sassy black cat named Snappy and a goofy white puppy named Lionel. Let's give Miranda a big welcome being here today.
Thank you for the introduction, Joe. And thank you so much, everyone, for giving me the opportunity to get to share a little bit about myself and to connect with you and hopefully get to hear from you and hear some of your questions. I actually do have some slides to share just to kind of keep me on track. If I can share my screen, thank you. So yes, again, my name is Miranda Schubert. I'm running for the open seat on Tucson City Council to represent Ward 6. I'll go ahead and skip my biological slide since Joe already went through that. It's great to be able to join you today on my lunch break. I'm calling in from my day job as operations manager at KXCI. I thought it would be helpful to just give a brief overview of sort of the main policies and priorities that my campaign is about. But I think that I wanted to just open by talking a little bit about why I think any DGT member or any member of the community should care about who gets elected to the Ward 6 seat, even if you don't live inside the city limits and aren't able to vote for me. Ward 6 is in the center of Tucson, so it comprises Midtown, downtown, the U of A, 4th Avenue. So these are areas of high interest to anybody who lives in the Tucson metro area in terms of wanting good leadership in that position, somebody who understands the issues facing the community, understands the importance of investing public funds effectively. And, everybody goes downtown or goes to U of A for a show or something like that. And so I encourage you to not tune out if you're not a Ward 6 voter or not a City of Tucson voter, because I think that these issues affect everybody, regardless of where you live. So the main categories, safer streets for all has to do with fighting for safer streets and better transit for Tucson. So really looking at like the big picture of who we're planning for what priorities we're weighing, when decisions are being made about things like where we're building roads, how big are those roads, how are we maintaining them. Environmental resiliency, building a sustainable future for Tucson, has to do with more than just stewarding our natural resources. It has to do with seeing people as being at the center of decision-making in response to climate change, that we need to be looking out for our most vulnerable community members and the working families that are most affected by climate change as we continue looking for ways to adapt and grow into the future in a way that's sensitive. There's also community safety, reimagining public safety for a stronger Tucson. So looking beyond sort of the standard responses that we have to making people safer, looking beyond just having a commissioned officer. This is what the city of Tucson calls putting the right work in the right hands. So that's something that I very much believe in. Housing justice is a huge thing that I talk about a lot, wanting to create affordable, inclusive neighborhoods, really having a vision for Tucson that sees neighborhoods and communities as being at the center of helping people feel welcomed and included, wanting to create a sense of belonging and to invest in infrastructure so that people feel cared for. And then community engagement is one of my very favorite things to talk about. I think it is incredibly vital that people who are most impacted by decision-making have a voice and a seat at the table. And that I feel an elected official is a public servant whose job it is to be very attentive and attuned to the needs of the community, the feedback that the community is providing, and to carry that to the decision-making table in order to help it shape policy and decisions. And as I'm going through this, feel free to type questions into the chat. I'm going to go through this a little quickly because I think it's more interesting to be able to have dialogue. So just to share a little bit more about Safer Streets for All and the experience that I'm carrying into that, I'm partly looking at this through the lens of being a commissioner on the Complete Streets Coordinating Council. So this council was stood up in order to oversee the implementation of the City of Tucson's Complete Streets transportation policy, which was passed several years ago and has to do with balancing the needs of all users of the roadway. So not just cars, but including cars amongst all the other people who are traveling along our streets. We have many people in Tucson who either can't afford a car or can't drive, whether they be youth or seniors aging in place and needing to get to appointments. We have cyclists, whether they're recreational or commuters. Bicycles are also a great way to give youth who have jobs some autonomy, so looking out for safety for them. So the Complete Streets policy really has everything. It checks all the boxes. It prioritizes safety, equity, and sustainability. And to me, all of those also feed into our ability to create more economic vibrancy. The main driver, I think, for being so interested in Safer Streets for All has to do with wanting to eliminate pedestrian fatalities. So I'm not sure how many folks are aware, but the city of Tucson has some of the most dangerous roads in the entire nation. I believe we're in the top 10. And every year we break records in terms of the monthly tally of pedestrian injuries and fatalities. And I think that is an emergency situation that needs to be addressed. We do have existing policy documents that give us a roadmap, so to speak, on how to do that. So I like looking at programs like Vision Zero, which lays out specific interventions to eventually make pedestrian fatalities a thing of the past. So just some overarching objectives. I want to make sure the streets are built for the people who are using them every day. I think it's important to repair and maintain infrastructure and to set aside funding for that. Investing in safety features like sidewalks, lighting, transit systems. I've also spent the last several years fighting for the continuation of fare-free public transit. So I'm very passionate about looking for sustainable ways to maintain that funding. And then, like I had already mentioned, continuing to push for full implementation of the Complete Streets ordinance. In terms of environmental resiliency, I really do see economy and the environment as being inseparable, because our economy depends on healthy, thriving people who have money in their pockets to spend at small local businesses. Those people need, at minimum, clean air, safe water, and livable conditions, especially as temperatures rise. I think this can sound like a really overwhelming set of problems, and you might be wondering what a city council member would be able to do to address that, but we have really concrete things that we can do, actions that we can take, like combating urban sprawl. So not pushing out Tucson's outer boundaries further and further and encroaching on the Sonoran Desert, looking for smart ways to build within our existing urban footprint that are still sensitive to neighborhood concerns, historic preservation, our unique local character, and things like that. I would also, in addition to combating urban sprawl, I really want to obviously ensure continued access to clean drinking water, looking to improve air quality. Cars are the leading cause of greenhouse gas emissions and degraded air quality. So I think that the more we can look for alternatives to every single person being in a car, the better our air quality will be. I mentioned fare-free transit, and mandatory parking minimum requirements may sound like a dry topic, but it's actually very interesting and exciting stuff that has to do with reducing the cost for building new buildings, building new housing, and not setting aside quite so much of our land to park cars on. We actually have too much parking if you look at various studies and data that looks at the way that land is used in Tucson and what our requirements are. We have way more parking set aside than we actually need. I think a really good example is the Alcon Mall. All right, so community safety, and I'm happy to see that there are questions in the chat. Looking forward to addressing those. So I really do see true public safety as being about more than just law enforcement, looking for more than just punishing after things have gone wrong, but about looking at upstream ways of creating communities where everyone is feeling safe and supported, like they have access to quality housing, good job opportunities, things like that. I think these are real interventions that can help somebody never turn to a life of crime. I believe in a future where every Tucsonan, regardless of their zip code, can feel safe walking in their neighborhood, sending their kids to school, and living without fear of systemic harm. So basically, being able to pick up the phone and feel confident that the person on the other end will be able to understand and respond appropriately to the help that the person is asking for. I think it's really important to invest in violence prevention and community resources. And the city's done some great work on this already, and I would be very supportive. They have an Office of Violence Prevention that is doing some really innovative work. I also think the City of Tucson's Community Safety, Health, and Wellness Program is another example of the type of innovation that I would be supportive of. Of course, promoting transparency and accountability, expanding resources for crisis response. I think the overwhelming majority of the time when somebody is calling for help, it has to do with a lack of access to mental health resources, or rehabilitation, or other supportive services. So expanding those resources would be important to me. I'm really passionate about building safer and more connected neighborhoods where people feel like they belong and that they feel welcomed, and addressing systemic inequities, looking for safer roads and working toward those safer streets and roads for all, which involves really getting in the weeds sometimes into policy documents and other guidelines that shape how the city has to make decisions. So the next part is housing justice. So one thing that we do know thanks to the recent housing needs assessment that the city of Tucson completed in response to some recent state of Arizona legislation about housing. We know that the needs of Tucsonans are not being met by our current housing stock. We know that the majority of housing in Tucson is single family housing. So I guess where I'm going with this is that there are a lot of different types of people in Tucson, and I believe that they all deserve to have a housing type that matches their needs. So I'm thinking about things like duplexes and triplexes, small apartment complexes, little casita villages with shared amenities. There's a great deal of different types of housing that we don't have in Tucson that I think we could benefit a lot from. Rents are at historic highs, rental vacancy rates are at historic lows. We need to just build more housing, but we need to do that in a way that's sensitive to the needs of the community. I see way too many working people and young people that are being priced out of homes. I'm a homeowner now, but it's only because I'm married. Before that, I was a renter, and I always had well-paying jobs, but it really wasn't meeting the expense of being able to even consider purchasing a home. And right now, I know many people around my age or slightly older or younger who are in a very similar situation. They're making a good salary, they're working really hard, but home ownership is still out of reach. So perhaps if we had different types of homes for people at different income levels, that could be alleviated. So I want to expand housing options while also reducing urban sprawl. I'm concerned about gentrification and displacement, so I would be really supportive of tenant protections and community land trusts. I want to foster inclusive communities where I think that people really benefit from being all mixed up with people that are different from them, and folks can learn from each other and create that sense of interconnectedness. I think that's one of the things that I'm thinking about coming into the next 4 years, just the importance of community. I want to ensure that new housing developments are sustainable, that there's bikeability, walkability, rainwater harvesting, opportunities for solar, gray water, all the fun stuff that we all would want our houses to be outfitted with, but all too often it's too expensive to do that. And I also want to reduce barriers to building affordable homes while preserving neighborhood character.
One of the big questions right now, I guess, since the election is coming up here pretty quick, is the Prop 414, and of course RTA next. This is going to be significant chunks of the city budget, so of course people are interested in where you stand on those issues.
I really appreciate that. I've been listening to the community a lot about both of these things, about both Prop 414 and RTA Next. RTA Next actually wrote an op-ed for the Arizona Daily Star not too long ago, where my message was the way that it currently stands isn't something that I feel supportive of. That I think that the community needs to speak up, and if changes can't be made to the current mix of how things are being funded with RTA Next, it's not something I would be supportive of. With Prop 414, I've been hearing lots of concerns from the community. I've been listening very closely, and I just haven't made up my mind yet which way I'm going to vote.
Yeah, a lot of us haven't. So you can come to our forum on the 6th at 6 p.m. We'll have pros and cons discussed by a panel of experts. It's tentative now, but I'm gonna get that solidified at ASAP. So another question that arose was how to regarding aggressive traffic. How do we lower speed, create more safety for people? And is closure of any roads to vehicular traffic an option that we should be looking at?
Really
Gail and Paul asked those questions.
I really appreciate those questions. One thing that I always think about when it comes to designing, well, first of all, I think that one of the most important things we can do to make roads more safe is to design them for safety. I think when the only thing that you're expecting will make someone go slower is the speed limit, just a sign on the side. That's not enough. When roads are too wide and flat and there's nothing to stop cars from slowing down, it really does send the message that cars should be going fast. I think investing in traffic calming infrastructure would be a really important part of lowering speeds throughout the city. Road closures are pretty controversial. Closing roads to cars is something that I have heard from community members is quite difficult to do. I think it would take buy-in from the community surrounding whatever road wanted to be closed. As a council member, I'd be really interested in having conversations about that.
Right. Mike wanted to know what the city can do to help combat guns, especially straw purchases and prohibited possessors. And, you know, in that you could perhaps also discuss some of the budget priorities that need to be changed in order to promote the vision of public welfare and safety that you have in mind.
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of funding, I really do pay close attention to all the research that shows that the sooner that you provide opportunities to people, the more impactful, the more likely that they find opportunities to contribute instead of turning to criminal activity or violence. So I know youth programs have been shown to be quite beneficial in terms of gun violence prevention. So I'd be really supportive of investment in things like that, in addition to investment in mental health and other supportive services. The city can't do a whole lot in terms of gun regulation at the city level, but I believe that we should all at various levels of government be working together to pass legislation that can impact things like that.
Okay. Katie says single income households are struggling to afford housing, transportation, and living expenses. If they also have to pay for childcare, I don't know how someone who makes even $20 or $30 per hour can make it. Is there things that the city can do in order to reduce the cost of living for people and help them get by?
Yes. This is part of why I've fought for fare free public transit for the last few years, because it is incredibly vital in terms of letting people have more money in their wallets if they don't have to spend so much on transportation. And they're able to get to their jobs even if they can't afford a car. That's really important. This is also why I like talking about different housing types, because I think this is another way to help lower costs for people. If people have access to high quality housing that isn't so expensive, I think we've all witnessed that housing prices are going up, but the quality is not going up. So I'd be interested in looking for ways to promote more of that. And of course, investing in things like early childhood education and childcare programs and things like that.
That's all I have in the chat for right now, but I do have a question of my own. And that's, you know, there's obviously some tensions around housing and tensions between the goals that you've laid out, you know, limiting expansion out into new, you know, green fields or, you know, the desert basically. And, you know, building more housing. That's a tension. The tension between preserving the character of a neighborhood and allowing, you know, more intense occupational styles of housing. That's a tension. You know, people, I think you're in the Yes in My Backyard group. You know, people have a NIMBY attitude toward this sort of thing. They want to preserve what they have. They want to preserve the character of their neighborhoods, but we need more housing. How do we resolve those tensions? And more importantly, how do we encourage the private builders who build, you know, 99% of the housing out there to actually provide alternative kinds of housing and lower income housing, given that the state restricts our ability to incentivize low cost housing?
Yeah, really good question. I mean, first of all, I will never call someone a NIMBY. Something that really makes people sensitive and seems to shut them off to wanting to have conversations. I've seen this a lot over the years. And, you know, I think the YIMBY term is even an interesting conversation provoker for people, because I think sometimes people respond negatively because they think it means yes to everything. But really, it's just more about having a positive attitude of like, yes, we need to look at the possibilities. And so you named all these different tensions between the different priorities that I was talking about. And I would say there's no easy soundbite answer for that, except you've got to put somebody in that seat who is able to navigate nuanced conversations and bring people to the table over shared priorities. I'm a community organizer, and one of the things that I learned from people who know a lot more about community organizing than I do is that it's really important to be able to work together with people that you may not agree with on every single issue. But if you share the same priorities, then you need to build that coalitional political power to make those things happen. So regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, I haven't heard anybody say that they think it's really good that there are more unhoused people on the streets, or that they wish that people weren't taken care of. By and large, everybody is concerned about their fellow neighbor or the person that they see out on the street. So it's about bringing all those folks together and saying, how can we build more housing where it's needed? And I think it takes somebody who's going to sit down and have conversations with the neighborhoods, going out to the neighborhoods, meeting them where they're at to talk about housing, to make them feel more comfortable and like they have a say in what's going to happen.
Let me just follow up on that real quick. Are there across the board changes to our zoning ordinances and rules around new construction that we can make that will help with the situation? For instance, we recently passed the casita ordinance that allows anybody to, as a matter of right, just build a casita in their backyard up to a certain size. Are there things that you see being implemented around the country that we could adopt that would be useful, such as automatic approval of duplexes on single family unit currently zoned areas? You mentioned reducing the parking requirements for new commercial buildings. Are there things like that that we can adopt that we have not yet adopted that we should go for?
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned earlier, you alluded to state preemption precluding us from being able to require affordable housing, what they call inclusionary zoning.
Yeah.
So that's a big problem. State preemption is super interesting to me to try to undo. At the local level, I do think a comprehensive review of our zoning and land use and how we approach that would be a good first starting place. And I believe there's already interest within the city in doing that. They've taken some steps, like I think a couple years ago, they did a package of 10 code amendments that, among other things, reduced setbacks so that you could build townhomes. So, I mean, there's small rules about different things that stop different housing types from being built that we can continue to look at the local level. As far as an across the board thing, that's really not popular with people. I think that there really is a sense that the neighborhoods of Tucson and Ward 6 each have their own unique needs depending on where they are in the city. So I think it would be more of a, let's have a tool, but a tool that can be flexibly, kind of modified according to the neighborhood. City of Tucson's done some interesting things with overlay districts, like Sunshine Mile Overlay District. I know that took a lot of conversations with the surrounding neighborhoods, but I think the outcome was really strong. And in general, I think when you include public input from the start, you may have hard conversations, but the outcome is going to be more durable and people will feel more buy-in.
What are the big threats that you see to Tucson, not just our well-being here in the desert, but the existence of Tucson? What are the threats that you see to existential threats from global climate change to Tucson, and what responses should we adopt in order to counter those threats?
Well, I mean, I'm definitely very concerned about extreme heat. And I think there's been some good work that's been done at the local and the state level around things like worker protections, which there's a lot of workers that are kind of on the front lines and the most vulnerable to those effects. So I think continuing to look at those things, again, urban sprawl. And I know that there's a tension between needing to create more housing and wanting to limit that. But I think it's very important to look at innovative ways of using existing land, using existing empty and undeveloped lots within our urban footprint. in order to mitigate the heat island impact, create more tree canopy. You know, it's really interesting when you look at maps of Tucson and you look at equity and neighborhood vulnerability and you look at the heat island, it very much corresponds.
Absolutely.
Right. So I'm super interested in mitigating that. And I think looking at those maps in a few years, my idea would be there would be less urban heat island, you know. Of course, water is also a huge concern, but I feel like Tucson already does a great job of rainwater harvesting and things like that. And I would want to expand accessibility to those programs. It's pretty shocking how expensive some of those things can be, like the big harvesting barrels or contouring your yard for rainwater.
Well, Miranda, I've got a couple questions for you. And I really appreciate your call to action to all Southern Arizonans to realize that, you know, Tucson is our hub, and appreciate that. Have you thought about where we could have shared services between the city and the county?
Yes, absolutely. And something that I've heard a lot, you know, I've been making calls about the campaign for the past couple weeks, and one of the recurring things that people bring up is wanting to see more collaboration between the city and the county. So I'd be really keen on that. I knocked on doors for Jen Allen's campaign. I also knocked on doors for Adelita Grijalva's campaign. So I would be looking to strengthen those relationships and look for opportunities.
Awesome. Awesome. Susie Anderson has her hand up. Susie.
With the new administration in Washington, we're going to starve for more money, and just making larger sales tax is not going to be the answer for that. Have you got any solutions to everybody's lack of money, the shortfall in the number of people picking vegetables, fruits, working low-paying jobs, but they are members of our community, but they may not have the documentation they need? These are all problems that I'm worried about. Can you enlighten us what we can do?
Great to see you, Susie. And I'm really worried about that too. I'm really worried about the impacts to our economy. And you're so right about, you know, what these workers contribute, and the fact that they aren't. It's such a myth that they're a drain on our resources, right? Like, that's a total myth that has no evidence. There's a lot of concern at the local level about the impacts of the policies of the administration and deportations and things like this. And a lot of community groups have been working really hard on things like emergency protocols and know your rights workshops and checklists and creating kind of that community safety net. And it's really inspiring to me. So I'm not saying that I have all the answers about all of these things that are going to happen, but I think a really good place to start is to continue building community and connections with each other and sharing information, and bringing in more people who haven't been a part of these conversations before. And I know we talked about this, Susie, at the happy hour, about wanting to get out in the community and really invite people in. And then I saw you at the MLK celebration tabling. And to me, it's like, yes, what if we all did that? There's more of us that believe that people should be taken care of, and that migrant workers and immigrants and undocumented people are just as much a part of our community as anybody who's a citizen. And so I think we need to like hold that close and use that to build more coalitional power to elect people who reflect our values.
Okay. Thank you, Susie. And Trey Rhodes has a question. Trey? You unmute yourself.
Hi, Miranda. It's nice to see you. I appreciate you for coming out to DGT. I just had a couple questions. First question, kind of a piggyback off of Susie's question. Ward 6, a very diverse ward. what are you doing, or what are you hoping to do to make sure that you're kind of advocating for all of the people in that ward, and making sure you're meeting the needs of such a diverse population?
Thanks for the question, Trey. It's a really good question. Something I like to think about a lot. It's good to see you too. Yes, Ward 6 is super diverse. And I have been immersing myself in making connections with the groups that make up our community as much as possible. Because it's really interesting, it's really inspiring, and it's so much better to focus on than despair. So I'm, where my mind is going are, the mutual aid groups, paying attention to what they're doing, knowing that, oh, they're the ones that are putting the water coolers out in front of businesses along 4th Avenue. Looking at what community events are happening, like the anti-Trump rally that just happened last Monday, and being there. I think it's important to show up. It's important to show up to group meetings and neighborhood association meetings and just like listen. I think that's a really good place to start because there are a lot of constituents across the ward that have a lot of different opinions.
Absolutely, absolutely. I did have one more question, kind of surrounding energy usage and consumption. A lot of young people are, making a push for more renewable sources of energy, and even taking back, or kind of getting rid of some of our current structures, and our partnerships with companies like TEP. What are your thoughts around that? What do you kind of want to see the future of Tucson Energy?
Yeah, where my mind went with that question, thank you for asking, was, there's been a lot of buzz locally about community choice energy and public power.
Yeah.
Very interested. I'm very interested in those conversations and what community members are saying about that, about the feasibility study. I have friends who work at TEP, and they're really passionate about some of the clean energy initiatives that are happening there. So I'm like, tell me more. The other place my mind goes is divesting from fossil fuels, reducing plastic waste. I think those things are also really important to prioritize.
100%, 100%. All right. Thank you for, answering my questions. We appreciate you.
Okay, Mike, looks like we have some questions in the chat room.
Yeah. One that I kind of overlooked a little bit was somebody inquired about perhaps reintroducing traffic enforcement cameras. And I would remind everybody that, we had Prop 201 a ways back where voters approved the restrictions on those traffic cameras. But I guess it's of some academic interest, at least, if you think that there's a role for automatic enforcement now that we have AI and machine learning coming out so much, or traffic cams, automatic enforcement mechanisms like that on police cars. Is that something that we should explore or restrict?
Well, I think there's been some interesting information that's come out about facial recognition and the sort of bias that has been programmed into some of these systems. So I'd be worried about what measures there would be in place if we did implement some type of automated system. But there's also been a lot of research that supports that having some of that surveillance-based monitoring is a good way to go because it limits interactions with commissioned police officers with weapons. So blah, blah, blah. All that's to say, I would definitely want to explore it more. I would be very cautious about just wanting to trust AI or other automated systems to be unbiased. So I'd really want to look at that.
And on a separate subject that I have personal interest in, intercity rail. To me, it seems like a no-brainer that we should have intercity rail between Tucson and Phoenix, at least in order to connect our inner city rail systems and to connect the cities for commuters and for people taking flights in the different airports and just, for day trips up to the other metro area, in order to have, more flexibility and fun and, interchange between the metro areas. Is that something that you can foresee yourself working toward with the legislature and with your time on the city council?
Yes, this is something I bring up all the time. And I think it actually impacts democratic organizing too. I think about the legislators that have to travel back and forth. no, I'm obsessed with getting more trains. I love it.
Okay, so a train head like Biden.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, Andrea Kennedy has her hand up. Andrea?
I'm still seeing homeless when I go out to Speedway and Swan, which I think is a result more of greed than zoning. There was a number of people who took advantage during the pandemic, and people got kicked out of their little fusty, affordable apartments or trailers. What's being done? Anything new being done to help them? How will the present administration harm those efforts? Thank you.
Yeah, you make a lot of really valid points, and I'm really concerned about the administration too. And you mentioned greed, and that reminded me of the earlier question about, how can we get developers to build more affordable housing or better projects? And I think it has to do with looking for ways to incentivize or make it easier to build the types of development that we want. Right now, our system is very much skewed toward just rewarding, looking for the maximum profit. So anytime we can have tools that reward for other things besides just increasing profit, like maybe reducing an impact fee for including more affordable units, or alleviating some of the height or density restrictions if there's affordable housing. I would be looking for any and all tools to keep that kind of thing in check. I also really believe in things like community land trusts and looking for ways of disentangling housing from the market, from the forces of the market. I think that there should be a drastic overhaul of public housing. I've read a lot about social housing. These are programs that the government partially oversees and that tenants also have a voice in. So very intrigued by things like that as well. I don't think that the market's going to save us, but also, unfortunately, we live in capitalism, and a lot of our land right now is zoned in a way that just lets developers do what they want.
Okay, Paul Stapleton-Smith has a question.
Miranda Schubert, we couldn't be more delighted that you're with us today. And I want to echo, you just did such a tremendous job, but the questions of this group, we have a very educated group here. And I think we can say there is no silver bullet to housing. We need a box of silver bullets. That said, we are running on the defense side. This goes to Sister Andrea Kennedy's point. I'm currently working with a team to run tenant protections. Here in Pima County, we have voluntary settlement conferences if you get an eviction notice. It's a model, right? So we're running legislation now for amendment to the Tenant Landlord Act to make, when you receive eviction notice, that there's a mandatory settlement conference. It's a win-win for the landlords. It's a win-win for the eviction, for the folks affected by eviction, whether they can stay in their home or not. We keep their eviction off the record. That's finger in the dike sort of stuff. The reason we're doing it at the state is because the city is functionally preemptive, right? And that's important. And this group is on that. They understand we have an adversarial state government for 45, 50 years that is trying to keep a charter city like Tucson from doing things. If I may, that's the context. What we can do is what we need to be able to know and then clearly distinguish from the state, right? And God knows we're not going to get any more help from the feds. How would you guide us to be the best supporters for solutions for housing? How can we be good supporters? How can we be good Democrats who actually deliver solutions within the confines? Electing you, of course, is obvious, perhaps an obvious choice. But how would you direct us to be the most effective in the current environment?
That's such a good question. I really appreciate it. This is something that I've spent the past few years actively thinking about and working on, because I don't think it's easy to have conversations about housing. And I think there's a lot of public education that needs to happen where there's so much to know. Like you said, there's no one silver bullet. There's a whole box, and it's pretty complicated stuff. So as an elected, I would really be looking to community groups, labor groups, unions, tenant unions, as partners, sort of that inside outside organizing that says that, I'm the person in the decision-making room, but you all are out connecting with the community, connected to the on the ground issues, and letting that inform. So I think that this could be a really good time for us to bring people in, people who are feeling really scared, rightfully so, about what's coming next. This is a good moment to invite those people into your group and get them involved in doing the work. I think that's a great starting point.
I have a question. You did mention that one of the things that you support for public safety is the right job in the right hands, I think is the tagline that you used. My question is, if we're going to have other ways to respond to public safety issues, such as responding with EMTs, responding with psychological support, responding with social support, with public services, how do we do that? How do we budget for that? And does that necessarily include reductions of budget for having Leos on the street? Or is that something that you think we're going to be able to continue to increase policing while also doing this? Or do we put some of these responses under the responsibility and control of the police?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been really good that the city of Tucson has so many more CSOs, community safety officers, I believe, than ever before. I'm pretty supportive of things like that. I think that there's conventional wisdom that I have heard from people who work within governments that says that if you increase funding in one area, you have to decrease in another area, and that there's no third way. But I'm pretty stubborn about that. I still want to try to find a third way. I think that, Council Member Ulick, who is finishing out the Ward 6 term right now, just as the appointee, she's not planning to run. But I would be looking to folks like her, folks like former city manager Albert Elias, to learn more about other places to look for money, because there's always more. If you're thinking outside the box, there may be some fee somewhere that you could increase slightly that will lead to much more. When we were talking about funding public transit, one of the things they were looking at were bed taxes on hotels, and it was like, oh, a couple bucks, per person adds up to several million when you scale it out. So all of that is to say, I would be looking to be collaborative, to be innovative, to look at available information and also case studies from other municipalities to look for those alternatives.
Okay, Jim Hannon has his hand up. Jim?
Hi, Miranda. Thanks for being here today. I wanted to circle back to the Prop 414 for just a second. It just seemed like it got put together so quickly. A few years back, the county did a bond proposal, and it took like 2 years to get all the, stakeholders in place, and they had tons of meetings. And so I'm just kind of wanted, not so much how you plan to vote, but kind of the process that put that on the ballot. So to me, so quickly.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Jim. It did feel pretty fast. And I was following the issue. The explanation that I heard was that it had to do with the city needing to first find out if they were legally able to put together a proposal of this nature that put those different kinds of budgetary line items together. And so unfortunately, between finding out that decision and then wanting to get the measure on the ballot, I also know that the reason that it's on the March special election and not in November is because they didn't want that to be on the ballot at the same time as RTA Next. So it was a lot of technical things that led to this, and I think it'll be interesting to see what voters decide.
Yeah, I just wanted to close out the hour with an invitation to you to, solicit people's support, tell us how we can get involved in the city council races, and what your needs are campaign wise coming up here shortly.
Thank you so much. So there's information in the chat. Right now we are in the signature collection phase. So if you are a Ward 6 voter, you can sign my nomination petition. I need to collect a certain amount of signatures to get on the ballot, a minimum of 576, a maximum of 1,151. If you're in this meeting right now and you're not in Ward 6, please share with anybody who might be in the ward. We're also seeking public matching funds. So every donation that we bring in, once we qualify, will get matched dollar for dollar by the city's program. So the donate link is also in the chat. And then of course, always looking for volunteers to knock doors. I think knocking doors is a great way to get your mind off of current events that might not be so uplifting at times. So this time went by so quickly. It's been a lot of fun getting to hear from you all and getting to share more about me. So thank you.
Great. And what a great program, Miranda. We really appreciate all the information and the blue skying, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Hey everybody, it's Senator Mark Kelly. As all of you know, Arizona Democrats have had a lot of important wins over the last few years. We won 2 U.S. Senate races, and we delivered Arizona's electoral votes to President Biden and Vice President Harris. We elected Governor Katie Hobbs, Secretary of State Adrian Fontes, and Attorney General Chris Mays. Now, those elections were close, and our victories mattered. Arizona Democrats from the federal to the local level have delivered real results for our state on critical issues like combating climate change, lowering prescription drug costs, protecting the right to vote, and preventing more restrictions on abortion access. The Democrats of Greater Tucson offers the opportunity to hear from elected officials and candidates about that important work and the issues that matter to them. That information will be invaluable as Arizonans head to the polls. So this election cycle, whether you're signing up to knock doors, make phone calls, or joining the Democrats of Greater Tucson to hear from and speak to Democrats in our area, please know that your voice matters and we need you on this team. Thank you.